Welcome to She Rebel Radio, the podcast for high-performing women leaders who want to unlearn conventional rules, leave prestigious careers, and launch businesses of significance. Each week, She Rebel Radio brings you insights and advice from women entrepreneurs who transformed their prestige prisons into daring entrepreneurial success stories. Now, here is your host, Lulu Nins.
Welcome to a special episode of She Rebel Radio, episode 34, The First 10 Years in Business with Dana Denis-Smith. This is a special episode to continue celebrating International Women's Day and Women's History Month, as Dana is such an inspiration as the founder of First 100 Years, which is a groundbreaking video history project supported by the Law Society, Bar Council and ILEX, which charts the journey of women in law since 1919. Dana's background is firstly as an international journalist before she retrained as a lawyer, which she said trapped her sense of freedom to be creative. In both 2007 and 2010, Dana has created two award-winning and multi-million pound companies, the latter of which is Obelisk, as Dana saw that women were being wasted in the legal profession. They were wanting to continue to work, but were being denied the opportunity due to the prevailing societal norms in the profession in particular. Obelisk now has over 1,500 freelance lawyers and supports a number of FTSE 100 companies. Dana won the Legal Personality of the Year in 2019. It's an absolute honour to have her with us, especially in the month of Women's History. So enjoy episode 34. Hi, Dana. It's good to have you here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
It's my absolute pleasure. Dana, I love that I've read that you've said that being a lawyer trapped your sense of freedom to be creative and being invited to contribute. Did that also impact your sense of purpose? And why did that feel so important to you?
For sure. I mean, I think, to be honest, my sense of purpose was probably born much earlier than becoming a lawyer. I became a lawyer probably linked to wanting to make a difference. But I think I was carrying it around before I became a lawyer. Because I started my career as a journalist, and I think I was very straight out of high school into journalism, and I had, well, I think the opportunity to have a lot of close relationships with humanity, if you like, for the variety of assignments I had as a journalist. Mm-hmm. Anything from war zones to children that didn't have families, and all this kind of real sense of humanity can really let you down that I think I encountered as a journalist. So in a way, I kind of responded to wanting to make a difference much earlier than wanting to be a lawyer. But when I did come to the law, I thought I can use it as a tool to make a difference. But I didn't feel in the city I was able to do that. So I was looking for another way to use my skills differently. But I think I carried that purpose with me for a while.
Yeah, it sounds like it's something that's run through as a thread throughout your career. And I totally resonate with not feeling like I was making a difference as a lawyer, for sure. When did you first kind of feel that way? Or was it from the off, being a lawyer, that actually it wasn't making the impact that you wanted?
Yeah, well, I started training. I started basically my legal education part-time because I was still a journalist. I was working with the Economist Group at the time. And so I decided I would go and retrain to be a lawyer. And I didn't want to give up my job. So I went to evening classes for my diploma year. And then obviously, having secured the training contract, I went for the LPC full time. I think by the time I hit the LPC, and that was very kind of, magic circle specific. In fact, I think we were all kind of, from the same firm, basically being put through the same program. It felt to me like it was too much, really, to allow me to be who I wanted. Mm-hmm. So in a way, when I was doing my first stage of the education, I felt, I was interacting with people that were like me. They had day jobs. They were real, if you like. They were leading a life around their legal education. They were aspiring, some of them to be, working on police matters because they used to be policemen. So they want to bring that kind of law into and through the life they had before.
Mm-hmm.
I went to the LPC full time. It felt to me very operational, very kind of restrictive, and totally lacking in any creativity. And I think I had a glimpse of what's to come at that point. I was slightly concerned. I went through it and I did it, but I wasn't sure anymore that purpose was at the center of what I was going to do next.
Mm. Yeah, I love that you said that you felt that it was impacting on who you wanted to be, that sense of identity that the LPC and the operation of it can suck out quite quickly.
I mean, once you become an entrepreneur, you run your own business and you build it and you try to build a culture, I think you reflect on it and you see it in a slightly different way, because that kind of excellence in service, that continuity of business delivery, all these things that you actually do care about when you run a business. I can see why certain things were done in the way they were done.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was more around, are you looking at people in the round and are you able to really tap into their full potential? So for me, that I think it was still something that I was left questioning as I went in, obviously with my journalistic career, and I could write and I could contribute. And I could see some of the things in a different light. But I think because it's a very hierarchical system and the partnership, you kind of have to wait your turn to speak.
Yeah.
You did have a voice. And I guess because I had a career before and I was quite, probably confident in what I had done up to that point, I felt it was a missed opportunity not to look at me in the round and say, is this person technical ability? Yes, we're here to develop it as a lawyer, but is there anything else you can bring to the party? Obviously I've turned up to be able to build a business and sell.
Yeah.
So could I have been a good salesperson even at the junior end and contributed in different ways?
So you were in India both times. You formed the idea of two successful companies. Why do you think India has been a source of inspiration to you in creating purpose-driven businesses this past decade or so?
So I think the first reason I find it amazing is because it's very entrepreneurial. A lot of people set up their own small businesses just to make ends meet. But they maintain a really positive attitude to life, irrespective of the difficulties they face. I just love the energy, and I just, you can see so many problems that can be resolved and needs tackling in that kind of society. And I find it very inspiring because just I land and my head just goes into, what can I do? What can I do more of? What can I, what would I do differently? All of these kind of questions go through my mind, which is where ideas land.
Yeah.
Every time I visit something that's very kind of purpose driven, I would say. So I visited, for example, an organization in my last trip, the trip that got me thinking about Obelisk, where they were using a lot of women that escaped abusive marriages to dye fabrics with natural dyes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was providing all these women with lifelines, and a very positive way of living out of a background of misery. And that was just wonderful to see how somebody can come up with something and make such a huge impact on somebody's life. I also went to see the outsourcing centers where a lot of the work was going to India from the UK, including some of the legal work. And I felt they were set up in a really quite dehumanized kind of way, very crammed, very not very nice. And I thought, well, actually, if you want to use these people because you want to leverage on the lower wages, how about you give them a good dignity to work kind of place to work rather than just putting them into a battery farm kind of setup. So I kind of saw both ends of how people were treated and how people were empowered, or how people were just, use is maybe a strong word, but kind of, being brought in because they were cheaper as opposed to necessarily being given the kind of dignity of work that I expected of a multinational. So all of these kind of thoughts crossed my mind, and I always find it really energizing, but at the same time they have amazing spots of calm. So I always go up into the mountains, the Himalayas, and you just have no Wi-Fi and no distraction, and you have those moments of calms where you can distill your thoughts, and all those energies kind of come into some more coherent thought process, and then you can maybe emerge with something more formed, rather than just the kind of, I like to help but I don't know how, but you feel you come out thinking of a way in which you can do something differently.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, so many people wouldn't think of India as somewhere so entrepreneurial, and all of the magic that you see there. And it sounds like the word that kept on coming up for me when you're talking about that is helping you tap into, and us tap into, being much more solution focused because of seeing how problems are being resolved on that scale.
I would say so. I mean, I think also, obviously it depends on how your brain works, but I find it exciting to be faced with problems that I can try and resolve. That's really exciting to me, and luckily I think I'm quite good at finding solutions. So, it's not just about spotting the problem. I'm equally passionate about solving the problem, and so it's nice to be able to be in a place where you just feel, that you can make every day counts and every minute counts. It can really, really make a difference. So I love India.
Yeah. I think places like India, there's a sense of allowing you to feel much more present. And as you said, that you can tap into more coherence as well when you're in nature, in terms of becoming more solution focused.
But also, I think it can give you, also a sense of how much you have. And the kind of waste. And I think because I grew up in communist Romania, I didn't have a lot of things when I was growing up, but I didn't feel poor, if you know what I mean. I felt there was a kind of element of hardship because I wasn't spoiled, but at the same time I didn't feel poor. And I felt able to be creative around what I did have, to make more of it rather than less. And to me, I've always kind of had this dislike of waste, not from a kind of stingy point of view, but more from a kind of, how do we maximize the resources and how can we think creatively to come up with solutions, rather than thinking we have to have a completely reinvented wheel. Is there something we can do in optimizing what we already have? When you look at what my business ended up doing, that's kind of what we've done. We've looked at people and we said, well, we've got a lot of people and a lot of them are going to waste, maybe because our culture is not good for them or our working ways are not good. And are we wasting these people? So my kind of passion for optimizing and problem solving, but also looking at people in the round and not liking waste, they all came together, I guess. In creating the business.
And a big message behind what you've said there is, instead of asking for more, looking at what little there may be and finding a solution with that. The answer's not more, which so often people, particularly in Western culture, think that the answer's in more, but actually it's providing solutions with less.
Well, I think, there's bootstrapping and there's bootstrapping, right? So there are certain problems where you can find internal resource to resolve it, but then there are also external, well-targeted things in which you can, push change a little bit further than you could if you bootstrap, right? So I think it's about the right solution for the right problem, but it doesn't always have to come with throwing resource at it and somehow it will go away. It just doesn't happen that way. You can start by really understanding the problem maybe in more depth, and that, bootstrapping can be good for that because it makes you go into a kind of richer analysis. Whereas if you do want to resolve it, you might sometimes require much stronger and bigger resources or more finance or whatever, but it needs to be targeted to a well-defined problem. And very often you can see kind of quite a scattergun approach towards problems, where you identify the problem, maybe you don't analyze it in sufficient depth, but you throw money at it and then the results don't come, right? So I think it's about the methodology and also about the definition, and then it's about how targeted you are, and really at the end of the day is how motivated you are to see the goal being achieved, however difficult it is to achieve it.
Yeah, absolutely. So much gold in your words, for sure. And I love that you saw a number of women lawyers being wasted in the legal profession and being an untapped resource, and that's how Obelisk was set up. And you've explained to us really well what your motivation was for that. But can you tell us a little bit more why you saw that as something that you personally wanted or needed to take on and provide a solution for?
Well, for me, to be honest, it was quite an economic analysis, if you like, or maybe socioeconomics. So for me, it was more around there seemed to be a rising demand around more flexible, more affordable, but also good quality legal services.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly as a result of the financial crash and the whole, um, a lot of firms were facing a lot of cost cutting, and they needed to come up with ideas about how they will do more for less.
Yeah.
And then at the other end, I saw that one of the solutions they were using was this kind of, let's offshore to somewhere cheaper. That seemed to be how they got their affordability done, but they weren't really necessarily getting the quality, or there was a lot of intervention. I mean, not to mention climate change, I mean, if you put lots of managers on a flight to
Mm-hmm.
India every month, then maybe, your footprint is not going to be great.
Yeah.
So they were kind of going for where can I get the cheapest possible solution and the fastest to deliver a cheaper
Mm-hmm.
operational model, because we are, under immense pressure. But they weren't really thinking about how to leverage the local workforce
Yeah.
and how people needed to work in a different way to be able to fit into the working patterns that could deliver affordability and maybe even better quality, but
Mm-hmm.
quite localized. So for me, it was around thinking, okay, so that's what the client wants. That's the pressure. I completely get it. They want a business that's reliable and they can trust. That
Mm-hmm.
comes without saying. It's professional business.
Yeah.
So you need to have that trust. But then I thought, but how I deliver the work doesn't need to be in the traditional way. So a law firm is set up as a partnership with lots of, with a pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
What's to stop me to reintegrate a lot of these people that want to work fewer hours, different hours in their own time, 4 a.m. if that's when they get up and they have 3 quiet hours.
Mm-hmm.
Why can we not capture that time
Yeah.
and use that kind of time to deliver a service back into these clients? So for me, it was around how do I marry something that seems to be an impossible marriage, between people that don't want to work set hours, or they're too far away from the destinations where they could work, even if they wanted to work full time. They just, or there's just not enough jobs full time for everybody to have, with this need to do more for less. And my idea was to stop the waste of talent, and to bring those people that need that, transition way of working into another entity like our business, and to feed that kind of capacity into the engine. So that's kind of what I set up. It was obviously at the beginning just mums, really. I mean, it was a lot of women, but
Mm-hmm.
increasingly there are older men, people that are, you know, at the end of their career maybe, and they still want to keep going, but in a different way. They might have other caring responsibilities. They might have elderly parents that need to drop in on them. So they don't have that kind of regularity of how they work, but it doesn't mean they should be deprived from the dignity to do any work. It shouldn't be a zero-sum game. So my idea was to create a win-win-win business where people that have a different way of working requirement for a variety of reasons can still feed into an engine that delivers a reliable service to a client, and doesn't need to be offshore, and it's very much local.
Risk and uncertainty go with the territory of being an entrepreneur and a business owner. How did you overcome that when you first started out?
I guess, to be honest, I had all the usual stereotype barriers that you could dream, and they are very real for women in business. Everything from somebody saying, "Oh, what you're going to do." you're never going to succeed. Or I also had pregnant very soon after up, and so I had my child in the first year, and lots of meetings where people were kind of explaining away what it's like to have a child and how I'm bound to want to give up once I've had my child, because obviously no professional mother would want to continue to work. I didn't raise finance because I did a few meetings with angels, had conversation, what I might as well clients rather than find some investors. So I think everything from the book happened to me as
Yeah.
well. I I didn't expect to return to the legal profession, because when I left Linklaters and I set up my first business, it wasn't any law. It was linked to my journalism, my writing, and my interest in political economy. And I just wanted to marry everything that I've done before and build up to the next stage. But I didn't really have a defined idea of coming back and, setting up a business in the legal profession and, doing it. So for me, in a way, I started with a surprise of my own return. I had this idea that I was going to solve a problem that I found was running really deep. I I've never been afraid of failure, because, to be honest, as I said to you before, I guess when you don't have a lot to lose, you don't have a lot to lose, right? So you
Yeah.
just have a shot, and you try the best, and at the end of the day, whatever happens, you will come out, I feel, a stronger and bigger person
Yeah.
by having tried rather than not tried. So I was very clear in my mind that by having a shot, by growing as a business person, understanding what it means to run a business, really growing this whole organization with patience but no fear, was something that I was in for, and motivated, if you like, by looking at my newborn child, and she's a daughter, to think that I can maybe reimagine the future in a way that is providing her an equal future. And so it's quite, clear in my mind that I didn't have high expectations that it will necessarily take off, because you can't really start thinking you will, make it. But I was very clear that whatever will happen will make me a bigger person, in the sense of learning as an executive, in terms of reflections on leadership, what all these things mean, knowing cash flow, all of those things I was, and to why I'm getting up in the morning, or why I'm putting quite narrow and focused, that it's a problem worth solving. And I was going to see where it was going to take me. I definitely wanted it to be big, but I just didn't, know for a fact that I could do it. I just went for it.
And when you say that you were surprised by your own return, is it that there, when you look back, it makes sense, your journey, but sometimes when you're making those steps forward, you don't always know why you're starting this or starting that, or having a legal career and then leaving, starting something different, and then going back to actually creating something in the legal world. Doesn't always make sense at the time that we're making those steps. Is that something that you would kind of resonate with for your journey?
I think for me, the great thing about going into the legal profession, it was such a contrast to journalism, the kind of freedom to roam that I had, and find my own story, and connect with people on the ground. And it was like 180 degrees the other way. And to me, in a way, it just it gave me an even sharper focus on what I was good at, and what I could really be good at, and what I cared about. So actually, sometimes it's good to be in, like a fish, the water, because you realize that you like the water, and that's your comfort zone, and that's the area where you can, really flourish, right? So I think for me, it was the right thing to go into a legal career. I had, again, when I started, I wasn't sure. I mean, my husband said to me I shouldn't do it, because he said, you've got other qualities that you don't need to go through. You don't need to put yourself through this, and to discover. But sometimes you do need to, you need to be the cold face of finding yourself. And I did. And I think that was a great lesson, to be able to be there and to say, you know what, I've learned what I needed to learn, but actually everything else beyond this is I don't need it. I'm fine. I've learned, and employment, it was perfect. I've understood enough about employment and claims and difficult situations with people at work to take away as an employer. And everything else was going to be a way of delaying a decision. And I'm pretty action focused, so I don't like just dragging my feet. I like to take action. So the minute I felt I was in danger of dragging my feet or just doing it for the money, I knew I was going to entangle myself into a future that I was not going to be happy with. And so I said, less money from the very beginning is perfect. Then if you're a senior associate on 200,000 a year, then you might struggle to leave. But if you're a new qualifier and you're going up to the next band of salary, you have, it's a lower bar, so it's the right time from my point of view. But I will never say it wasn't a good thing to go into training as a lawyer. It's been it's been great for me, actually.
Yeah, and you've used all your experience from journalism and the legal profession and that contrast to create what you've created.
Yeah. So I think it's more around being alert and being, if you like, having those moments of introspection to realize what you take away and then how you can apply them, as opposed to rejecting something just for the sake of it. So I've always been very good at kind of going in leaps and thinking and then reflecting back and then reinforcing some of the qualities that I've identified, and then, progressing.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really important and powerful. So what inspired you, and importantly, where were you when you decided to start the First 100 Years project?
Well, I was at home, actually, and my husband, who is also a lawyer, had received his alumni magazine in hard copy from the law firm, and where he only spent about a year. But anyway, he was getting this hard copy magazine in the days when they were hard copy.
Yep.
And I remember I opened it and I always read all of these things, all his publications from the Inn, where everything. I was always opening them. Even before I went into law, I always read them. And I browsed this magazine and I saw this big feature on a man. I don't remember his name, but he was turning 100.
Yeah.
And it was an interview about, his memories. And one of the pictures that illustrated the story was a double spread. His story was this picture of the firm's party to celebrate 100 years of the firm, or 150, I can't remember exactly. And there was just the one woman in the middle. I mean, the story was nothing to do with her. And it was all to do with him. And he, the picture carried numbers of the men he mentioned in the story and all of that. And that picture just really hit me because I read it, and it says something about 1982. And I was already born, and it just suddenly, like the penny suddenly dropped. And this was November 2013.
Yeah.
When I read this magazine, and I tweeted the firm saying, "Who's the woman in the middle?" And I didn't hear back. As a qualified lawyer, I had zero information about our past.
Yeah.
So the numbers, which they used to annoy me. I remember that every year the stories about the partner were always irritating me, invariably every year. Then I realized that the reason why they were irritating me was because there was a lack of context. So what did they mean year on year? What was the story? And there was no grounding of the story because nobody had looked at the history of women in law. So there was no placing these numbers into the kind of history. And therefore, they didn't make any sense to me. I didn't care there was like 0.5% more or less women, because what does it mean?
Yeah.
Whereas I did once I realized there had been zero women in 1920. until 1922. And, therefore we only had one partner in 1982. I could figure that, 6 years later, maybe women weren't getting a lot of jobs. So anyway,
Yeah.
so it helped me place women's journey into its history, and therefore those numbers started making more sense, and therefore it became more actionable because they were problematic numbers
Yes.
in the context of having more women than men coming in.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, trying
Anyway,
to put
so
some context around the statistics that we've been told, and the history of the women that came before us and paved the way for us.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then I just contacted, I knew a lady who was a web designer, and I said, I'd like to do this. Will you help me visualize it and create a website and naming the first 100 years, and then going to each one of the professional bodies and asking them to support us with no money, just with being involved and making sure that the centenary doesn't go unmarked. Because it was, in good enough time, because I started 5 years, the soft launch was March 2014.
Yeah.
And that was 5 years before the centenary. But my concern at the time was that if so little had been done in the past about any of the landmarks or any of the anniversaries, my worry was that the centenary will also be downplayed.
Yeah.
So I didn't want that to happen, but I felt I needed enough time with my business and my young family to have time to build up to what it should be, which should be a big celebration of all that women have contributed. So I had to give myself 5 years to get there.
Yeah. And how did you find the time for you on a personal level in terms of, you were running a business, you're probably about 4 years into your legal business at that point and being a mother. How did you find time for this, such an important project?
I don't know is the answer. Sometimes you find time where, you just don't know how you do it. And I think generally I don't know how I did it. I know I've poured hours, thousands of hours into the project. My poor child, she's heard it all. And, to the point where she took to the stage to fundraise for our first 100 years book at the age of 7. Because
Amazing.
I felt it was important that the next generation tell people what they understand, why this project was important. Because I think, sometimes we forget to think about our actions in terms of legacy. And I think I've learned that from the first 100 years that too few women thought about the impact they had on the next generation.
Yeah.
Because they were just struggling to just survive. But we're not in that position anymore. And I think how we will be remembered and what we pass down is essential to setting up the right foundation for women in terms of what they focused on, what they're asking for, rather than ask for everything. What are we focusing on to see that change really happen? So to me, I learned from my child. She's now 9, and just having her, go through our book or for the project or for the films and telling me what she understands, it's already, if you like, a way for me to feel whether I'm communicating effectively. Are we making sense? Are we making sense not just for ourselves, but for the next generation? Are we telling a story they understand, or are we too caught up in ourselves? And I'm very caught up in the next generation from that point of view. I want them to know that we are building something for them to have an easier path.
Yeah, I love that. And the project is moving into the next 100 years. Is that right?
Yes, from last week, actually, we've just announced it. And that's very much around taking the lessons of the past, but also, sometimes it's as important to tell people what is a story and what's an anecdote as is what is something you can build on. So what is the right legacy to use for as a foundation, aside from all the fantastic stories and all the kind of stories that we've collected, that's just brilliant, but also, being much more focused, I guess, in what we asked for is what we're doing. But at the same time, we've always been just really, really obsessive about having a celebratory tone and a very positive tone for the change.
Yeah.
So we've never really been about, we one thing that we did that was more negative, but not because we wanted it to be negative. It's just the way it came back. Was a survey last year where we
Yeah.
went and we said to the profession, how do you feel, woman-in-law, in this moment in time? And they all felt quite disempowered, and that there was still quite a struggle. And
Yeah.
that, in a way, it was quite saddening, because our tone tends to be positive, but you need to listen to how people feel.
Yeah.
And so, generally speaking, we're trying to take these messages and then just try and shape whatever we do next as an empowering, positive next step, as opposed to just dwelling on negative. So
Yeah,
last week
absolutely.
we had our first campaign on the next 100 years, called Face the Future, which was basically a second edition photography day. We did one last year, only in the UK, to get a sense of who are the women-in-law, what do they look like? Because obviously, in all the history book, when you look at the partnerships, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, they were just a collection of white men,
Yeah.
almost 99.9%. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, pretty well. Anyway, and I wanted to show that the women have almost like an inbuilt diversity within the profession. You see the women, and they're nothing like the men they used to run the firms. And
Yeah.
so we already have that kind of amazing foundation to say we are diverse as women, and how we then lead diversely is
Mm-hmm.
within our power. And the picture was just amazing, because we had 800 women that turned up at 4 locations to be pictured. And so we
Amazing.
wanted to set that day against the global context to see what is the picture in the world today, but also encourage men to join in. So
Yeah.
we had this day on Friday last week, in celebrating International Women's Day, and we had, I think, about 1,300 people around the world who turned
Amazing.
up, and we photographed them with our photographers in different locations. Anything from Uganda to Mexico City and Sydney and Vienna, and very different jurisdictions,
Yeah.
to get a sense of, how do they compare? I mean, how do they feel about equality? And are they prepared to put a face to it, a man and a woman? And it's just wonderful to see that kind of, global picture emerging. And so I
Yeah.
think we'll probably do a little bit more work internationally, where this kind of lack of information about the history of women is as acute as it was for us. Nobody's really taken on the work to say, this is the history, this is how women have contributed, and it's something to celebrate and build on rather than just ignore.
Yeah, absolutely. And the next 100 years are exciting, and I can hear how passionate you are about that project, full stop, and where it's leading to now in inspiring the next generation of women in the legal profession. It's very exciting.
Well, I think it's great to be involved, and to be able to, maybe bring some of the experience and my focus and my more targeted approach maybe to certain things, to show what is possible. Because as you say, 5 or 6 years ago, when I started the project with basically me and my baby in my arms, she was really like 18 months or something. Nobody, when you look back, you think, yeah, well, it was bound to be successful. Well, nothing is bound to be successful, right?
I definitely believe that women's entrepreneurship is part of the women's movement in the 21st century as well. So I'd love to know what's next for you, apart from the next 100 years, and for us as women in business in general for the next decade.
Well, this area is actually something I've looked at very recently. I focus on the legal sector because, there's a lot of kind of criticism about the structures that exist, the law firms that don't work, the QC system that is, not working for women. And I wanted to look at what is the new law environment for women, what is entrepreneurship for women in law, not just in terms of setting up as a, sole trader, solicitor, for example, but what does it mean if you want to scale a business? What are your barriers? And I'm afraid to say that was a very, 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 very dire picture. I mean, I was quite depressed because less than 1% of all funding goes to women founders in the legal profession of all the investment to date. And so you always stand a better chance if you actually start with a man.
Right.
So what do I think? I certainly think, and I'm 150% convinced that entrepreneurship is a great route for women to create the independent financial means for them to be able to have choices. I'm always very, very keen that people shouldn't find themselves trapped
Yeah.
in a kind of, end of the road with nowhere to go. And I think it's even more important for women to have that opportunity to say, I have my own money and I can pay for the childcare. I
Yeah.
can do this and that, and therefore I can also carve my own path. But in terms of where we are as founders in the legal profession, we are way behind the average across other sectors. Something
Right.
like, the average is about 2.7% of all money going into female founders about across the board, retail and whatever, whereas in law is below 1%. So it makes you realize the professional services environment is one where women actually struggle, irrespective of the structure in which they operate, whether it's a law firm, whether it's a service provider, as a founder. There
Yeah.
seems to be a real problem breaking through, and also not a lot of investment, not a lot of trust that women can do it. And so definitely that's one of my focuses, and that's why I did this research, and I also did a survey for female founders
Mm-hmm.
in the legal sector to see how they find it themselves. And I think everybody knows why it's great to be an entrepreneur, but they also feel worn out by the sexism.
Yeah.
And we need to address it head on.
Absolutely. Have you got any idea about how you're going to be addressing that head on?
Well, I feel a little bit like a mother figure, because I feel like I've managed to scale the business with no investment to make a kind of multi-million business. Well, I feel like I've learned a lot that just because we're still out here on the market and we're still trading, it's amazing that in less than 10 years, with a small child at the beginning, our fate could have been so different based on outcomes from other companies, right? So I'm thinking, what can I teach? What can I explain that I have somehow managed through all of these crazy obstacles and really unpleasant questions? So I think we need to start with everybody, really. I mean, I have with investors,
Mm-hmm.
they cannot ask questions like, have you frozen your eggs, of women when they come to pitch? That's not acceptable.
No.
We also have to have a word with actually have the opportunity to back these women and their products by giving them trials and paid for trials as opposed to free trials. Get them at the table so they're able to showcase what they can bring to the service lines.
Yeah.
Then, the schools and generally, I think the founders can be more visible. And I had a series of interviews in a legal publication, on a kind of legal publication form with different founders every month. And that's only my time. I mean, I can only do what I can do. I only have 24/7. But
Yeah.
I try for different ways of telling the same story, but talking about the breakthroughs, but also telling women you need to talk about the numbers, you need to talk about what your business has in terms of business metrics, not in just kind of fluffy, terms. So let's adopt to the kind of more targeted language of business as well, and be more focused and business-like. But if you get a pushback around, being the teddy bear business, or freezing your eggs, then you can see why people are reluctant to really go into the whole business conversation. You don't even get a chance. So different
No.
ways, I think, in which I'm thinking of tackling it. But definitely, as always is the case with this kind of a big elephant that's in the room, it's never a one person or one company or one initiative answer. It's an ecosystem structural problem. And it
Yeah.
requires a lot of people to come together and say, you know what, we don't want to rewrite history, but how about now we recognize the contribution of these women and what they're trying to bring us products. So let's give them a shot on equal
Yes.
terms to other businesses.
Yeah, and I can hear the cogs of your solution focused mind finding solutions to what's happening there, which is really exciting to see.
Well, trying always, but as I said, sometimes the problem is bigger than one person solution. So you need to bring people around and try and resolve it. But I'm optimistic because I think at the end of the day, a richer woman is a richer world, right? So it's not a bad. We're not asking for a bad outcome for humanity. We're asking for women that can have options and look after their children as well and have good partnerships at home. And what's wrong with that? Why can we not support it?
Absolutely.
So I think it's all for a good reason rather than, again, zero-sum game. I'm not into that kind of game.
No, definitely not. And thank you for being such an incredible role model to so many women. Is there anything last thing that you want to share before we go?
I'm not sure I have anything else to say.
You shared so many
about everything.
Wisdom.
I mean, one of the things I clearly haven't stopped doing is also putting more thousands of hours into the next 100 years and the next project. So it looks like I've learned nothing from the past in terms of making time for myself, right? But I do enjoy it. I think it's great to be in a position to to create outcomes. I mean, like the Supreme Court artwork that we donated, and I was so heavily involved getting that done, and we did it in 10 months, and it's a large piece of work. It's the first across history, and each unique but also the group together more powerful. To me, that's really a great legacy, but it does take time. Things don't magic themselves. Maybe a drinks party can be done that way, but in terms of if you want to have something that's visible, lasting, you need to put the time in to make it happen. And I've always, as I said before, feel like I learn from every of these opportunities. So I'm grateful I can create my own opportunities to grow and learn from the people I end up working with.
Absolutely, and find all those thousands of hours to put into these projects. It's incredible. Thank you so much.
Volunteering my daughter, right? So she said to me as the first 100 years was drawing close, she said, "You cannot stop, Mummy. You have to keep going. It cannot be the end of the first 100 years." So there you are. I have a champion that's quite happy to see me out of the way, pouring thousands of hours elsewhere.
Yeah, and I'm so excited to see what your daughter will be creating in the world with such an inspirational mum.
Well, she can make her own path.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, it sounds like she already is, which is exciting.
Yeah. She wants to be an archaeologist. I don't know why. Digging out women's stories. I guess she must have learned from this first 100 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I can see the connection there for sure.
Yeah, fabulous.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, and good to connect.
Hey, before you go, I would love to invite you to the members group for She Rebel Radio, which is live on Facebook and is a very small and intimate community where you can be further supported by me on a month-to-month basis outside of the She Rebel Radio podcast. So if you consider yourself as a fan of the show and find yourself showing up, listening to the episodes or even binge listening to the episodes, then I would love to invite you to the She Rebel Radio community. You can find the link in the show notes of this episode and the episodes hereafter, or you can just simply find us on Facebook or reach out to me via any other channel to talk about how you can become a member of this prestigious community. All you need to ask yourself is, are you a woman who has left or is leaving her prestigious position and you're starting or building your business of significance? And you want to do that and lead with real feminine presence. So let me take a second and just let you know what happens in the members group. Every month I will show up on a live video giving you a summary with Q&A of the She Rebel Radio episodes that have happened that month, or indeed any other month that you want to talk talk about, and you can ask your questions and be supported by me. In addition, we have a very popular Ask the Oracle live video also by me on a month-to-month basis, which we do for either the full or the new moon. And also you can turn up in there and find the threads where you can set your monthly intention, and I will help you with that. And also your monthly celebration. It's so important to celebrate the smaller wins that you have throughout your journey of starting your business of significance. It's only £55 membership for the group, or if you have attended a workshop or worked with me over the last 12 months, you get free access for 12 months. So reach out, find us. We would love to have you in the She Rebel Radio members group.
Thanks for listening to She Rebel Radio, the podcast for high-performing women leaders who want to unlearn conventional rules, leave prestigious careers, and launch businesses of significance. She Rebel Radio is executive produced and hosted by women's advocate and coach, Lulu Mims. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you never miss another episode. You can find Lulu Mims on Facebook and LinkedIn at Lulu Mims, and on Instagram at LuluMims_biz. Until next week, keep rebelling against the rules and designing success your way.